Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. And if you're new to the show, this is not the voice that I normally use for this podcast. If you've been listening for a while, you're thinking, what are you doing? Well, March 12 through 18 is Sleep Awareness Week, created by the National Sleep Foundation. It's a call to action for the public to recognize your sleep is a crucial part of your health and well-being. Now, I'm not a doctor or a scientist or a therapist, but I agree. Okay, I'm not going to continue to talk in the full ASMR voice, but I am going to talk in a slightly softer, more gentle voice than what I normally use as your podcast boss. Because this is a special episode of Podcast Envy in honor of Sleep Awareness Week, and I'm going to be sharing my nighty-night bedtime playlist. And this was brought about because do I want to spoil the surprise? Let me set the scene a little bit for you. I'm recording this episode as a live stream. So if you're watching the live stream, you're getting a behind the scenes of me recording this podcast episode. I may stop and start. I may take a sip of water. I may have to look something up real quick. I've created notes for the episode, but I haven't fully scripted it out. So that's the behind the scenes part. In this moment that I chose to record, I normally record in the middle of the day on the weekday because I live in a condo building in Chicago with thin walls, creaky floors, lots of stomping from overhead, and I'm very close to other buildings and courtyards and things like that. So normally I record in the middle of the day when no one else is home. However, for some reason, it's Monday night. And I thought Monday night, there's no parties on Monday night. No one has people over on Monday night. No one hangs out in the courtyard outside in March in Chicago, even if it is unseasonably warm on Monday night. Lo and behold, I was wrong. So you may hear some ambient sounds in the background of laughter and people talking and possibly music. And maybe if you listen very closely, you may even hear the sound of the fire pit snapping and crackling and popping because literally there is a party going on in the courtyard outside my office window on Monday night at 8:30 p.m. in March in Chicago. There's a fire. There's a circle of people. There's alcohol. I don't know. I thought this would be the safe evening time. I was wrong. Daytime it is in the future. In any case, those are the sounds that you may be hearing in the background. So there you have it. On today's episode, I am sharing with you some of my favorite nighttime podcasts to wind down to in the evening and even to fall asleep to. Hey, podcast app developers who are definitely listening to the show, hot tip. I would love to be able to use your app to create custom playlists for different times of the day. I have my morning motivation shows, which are mostly in the business, entrepreneurial, industry, personal finance categories. I have my afternoon brain fog shows that I like to listen to, which are mostly in the entertainment, pop culture, lifestyle categories. And then I have my night shows, which are more related to the quality of voice and theme music and the lack of annoying ads that are louder than the content or have boisterous music that doesn't match the vibe of the show, or just ads in general that don't match the vibe of the show. So anything that meets those specifications, those will go in my nighttime playlist rather than like a specific content type. And you'll see what I mean later when I get to the actual shows. So yeah, podcast app developers, for sure. I want to be able to have different playlists where I categorize shows based on the time of day that I want to listen to them rather than sliding episodes around in my playlist each day, trying to time it out for how much time I think I have to listen to podcasts. I don't know. Is that just me? Does anyone else think about podcast listening like that? Does anyone else listen to more than 5 podcast episodes a day on a regular basis? I digress. Okay. Before we get to my actual playlist, I'm going to tell you what inspired this episode. In fact, if you're watching the live stream on LinkedIn or on YouTube, I am going to show you the newest, the latest podcast angel. Podcast angels are those products, services, programs, etc. that help support and pay for this show because they compensate me for sharing them with you. Podcast angels must also meet the qualification of being something that I think that you need on your podcast journey, and they can only be things that I have personally used and love. So today's brand new podcast angel is a headband. Well, it's not just any headband. It has a super secret surprise inside because it is made by a company called SleepPhones, pajamas for your ears. I cannot tell you how often I used to try to fall asleep listening to podcasts, and I would try to fall asleep with headphones on or earbuds. And if they were Bluetooth, then they would disappear. They'd fall out of my ears. If they were over-the-ear headphones, which is my preference, I don't actually love earbuds, then I was afraid that I was going to break them, or they would be uncomfortable, or I couldn't roll over onto one side. And if they were wired, then I would get all tangled up in them, and I was afraid that I was going to strangle myself. Again, am I the only one? Does anyone else have this problem trying to fall asleep listening to podcasts? One day, my fabulous partner gifted me with this headband from SleepPhones because it is super soft and comfy. I can listen to podcasts. No one else can hear what I'm listening to. And I can lay on my back, my side, my stomach. It doesn't matter what position I'm in. It's super comfy. It doesn't fall out of my ears or off my head. I'm not going to strangle myself with any cords. This headband is genius. And not only does it help me with listening to podcasts to fall asleep, I have used them on planes while driving when it's cold outside and I need something to keep my ears warm anyways. I have used them while doing chores around the house. I have used them while doing yoga. Hey, listen, if you want to take a yoga class, but you don't love the sound of the teacher's voice, just put on the headphone and you can listen to something else. Just kidding about that part, kind of. I love these things. It's ridiculous how much I wear them. And so SleepPhones is a brand new podcast angel, and you can use my custom link to get your very own bit.ly/pep sleep, pep for podcast envy podcast sleep. And that'll take you to the SleepPhones site. And if you end up ordering a pair, they're going to send me a little thank you. And I'll probably end up spending it on another pair of SleepPhones, to be honest. And I am going to share with you my nighttime podcast playlist with some recommendations for you to check out. Also, I will say that a good tactic is to use a podcast app that has a sleep timer on it. So my favorite podcast app of choice is Castro, and Castro has a sleep timer on it. So I usually set it for 60 minutes. I press play. I make sure I have at least 60 minutes of nighttime content queued up, and then it'll shut off automatically after that 60 minutes has passed. So no need to worry about the wrong episode playing or being jarred awake or anything else of that nature. All right, here are some podcasts that I love to fall asleep to. Or in some cases, I may not always fall asleep to it, but I use it to help me wind down in the evening time. She probably would hate that I'm starting off the list with her show because I don't think she intends for it to be a sleepy time podcast. But my business coach, Diann Wingert, has a show called the Driven Woman Entrepreneur Podcast. And sometimes I listen to it in the morning, and then I listen to it again in the evening because I want things to soak into my brain while I'm sleeping. Diann's voice is so comforting and soothing to me. The only thing is she has some pretty rocking theme music, so that's why it's not an actual fall asleep podcast, but it can qualify as an evening time podcast that I love. So that again is the Driven Woman Entrepreneur Podcast, if for nothing else, for Diann's solo voice, and also for all of the entrepreneurial wisdom and motivation that I want to seep into my brain subconsciously as I am sleeping. The next category of podcast is weird for falling asleep to, I know, but here are two shows in the spooky story, ghost, supernatural genre, which are Homespun Haints and Stories with Sapphire. Ghostly, otherworldly things. I don't know why anyone would want to fall asleep to scary, spooky stories, but I sometimes enjoy that. I also have this theory because I tend to have very stressful, anxiety type, nightmarish dreams, very vivid almost every night. And I have a theory that if I listen to content that my dreams are less intense somehow rather than more intense. I don't know. But Homespun Haints is by Becky Kilimnik and Diana Doty, and they are fantastic. They bring on guests who will share real life ghost stories and haunting stories. I've actually been a guest on their show a long, long time ago, and I should probably put the link in the show notes for the episode that I did with Becky and Diana. And I will say that in their public feed, I believe they still have ads. And so that disqualifies them from this playlist unless you're a Patreon who is subscribing to their show for premium ad-free content, which is what I had to do. And Stories with Sapphire Sandalo, again, spooky stories. She has the greatest voice as well. Highly recommend if you want spooky stories to fall asleep to. Another show in the weird category of nighttime falling asleep podcasts is Beyond Reproach. They tell the real life stories of American political and governmental scandals that have happened throughout time and history. I don't even know why this is a podcast that I like to listen to in the evening, but they also give a cocktail recipe at the beginning of each episode. And similarly to watching the Great British Baking Show on TV, something about hearing the origin of a particular cocktail and the ingredients that go into it and the flavor profile is deeply soothing and relaxing to me. Tux Lurzel and Stephanie Domingo are the co-hosts. I love their voices. I love their storytelling quality. And so, yeah, if you want to fall asleep to stories of American political scandals and cocktail recipes, Beyond Reproach is your show. The next show, I don't even really know how I discovered this show, but I am currently obsessed, and I have been making my way through the back catalog of episodes going back several years, and I'm actually kind of getting nervous because I think I'm going to run out of episodes. This show is called Uncanny Japan, and the podcaster is Teresa Matsuura, and she's an author who writes short stories, short fiction set in Japan based on folklore and ancient tales and yokai and all of the creatures in Japanese folklore. And she also has this very soothing storytelling voice. The music is lovely and minimal. She has great sound quality. And again, a lot of her content is spooky stories. So I guess it kind of goes with Homespun Haints and Stories with Sapphire. But again, that's Uncanny Japan. And I just love the sound of this podcast so, so much. The next category of podcasts are like the meditative health and well-being type of podcasts. And so I have a few of them for you. And these are the podcasts, starting with Uncanny Japan and going on through the list. These are the ones that I actually usually totally fall asleep to, that I don't always hear all of. The first health and wellness podcast that I want to include on this list is Be Well, Sis by Cassandre Dunbar. Cassandra was on Podcast Envy a while ago talking about what else? Podcasting. And this is another one of those shows that I specifically look for any solo episodes that Cassandra might be doing, because her voice is very deep and lovely, and she just has such a calming, soothing presence. I love listening to her as I fall asleep. The next one is the Embody Podcast by Candice Wu. And fingers crossed, I was just talking with Candice online today on LinkedIn, and hopefully the Embody Podcast is coming back soon. She tells me that it is. And Candice, again, has one of those voices that like just puts me straight to sleep whenever I'm feeling too wound up. And sometimes I regret that I fell asleep during the episode. And so the next morning I'll look and see, oh, the episode did play. I need to go back and listen to it. And it's just very lovely. So even if new episodes aren't out yet by the time that you are listening to this, do go check out Candice's back catalog of episodes. Very lovely. The next one is the Intuitive Woman Podcast. This is with my friend Tina Conroy. Tina is an intuitive medium. She is an energy healer, Reiki practitioner. I have had some really incredible intuitive readings from Tina. She knows stuff that there is literally no way anyone could know, except that she does. And Tina, especially again with the solos, apparently I love to listen to solo episodes to fall asleep to. But again, with the solos, Tina's solo meditation episodes, particularly with gentle music playing in the background, will put me straight to sleep. And I feel so protected when I listen to her show. The next one is Meditative Story. This one is a more highly produced podcast that's super interesting in terms of format. So what they do on Meditative Story is that they will bring a guest on. It could be anybody. There are celebrity names that you may recognize. There are other podcasters who you may recognize, meditation teachers, actors, authors, athletes. And basically behind the scenes, the producers work with them to craft a scripted story from their real life. And then they record it in their own voice in a meditative sort of way. There's original music scoring underneath it. And then the host, Rohan, whose last name I'm forgetting right now, but the host, Rohan, will come into their story every once in a while with a meditative suggestion or a reflection exercise for you, the listener. Exercise sounds wrong, but a reflection for you, the listener, that has to do with the content of the story. The next one is Living Myth Podcast with Michael Meade. And this is another one of those podcasts that sometimes I need to go back the next morning and listen to what I missed, because what he does is he actually takes myths from different traditions and applies them to current social phenomenon and situations. and draws the parallels between these old myths and stories with what is happening right now in our lives. And I find it very fascinating to see how we keep playing out the same stories over and over again throughout our lives. And also just the sound and the little acoustic music of the show and the kind of old-timey feel of it, I find very relaxing. The Slowdown is a poetry podcast in which we hear the works of different poets read in a gentle, soothing way. I don't know what else there is to say about the Slowdown. It's a way to slow down with poetry. And then the last podcast, usually on my falling asleep playlist, I almost never hear. Occasionally, I will be asleep and something will wake me up and this will still be playing before the sleep timer has run out. And I'm like, whose voice is that? Where am I? Oh, and then I'm able to fall back asleep. This is Boring Books for Bedtime. And normally I don't love ASMR style podcasts. So what I was doing in the beginning of this episode, talking in this very close to the microphone, whispery, unvoiced kind of way, is a technique of ASMR. That whispery sound, or full-on whispering, that sound is soothing for some people, and it creates a sensory response in their nervous system that helps them relax, takes the edge off, and will put them to sleep. For me, I find it so grating and irritating. I cannot tolerate it. It's just me. I don't know. So I think ASMR is one of those things that you love or you hate, and it doesn't work for me. However, the closest thing to ASMR that I have found that works is Boring Books for Bedtime. In each episode, our host Sharon Handy calmly and quietly reads from an old public domain book. And I cannot tell you how much I love seeing things in the podcast feed, like she reads the Sears Roebuck catalog from like 1950 something, 1960 something, or the housekeeper's guidebook for this or that, or an instruction manual or something of that nature. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's a nonfiction book, just any book that's in the public domain. And she reads it in such a way where she starts with like a gentle, soft voice. I think that there's some music probably playing in the background or some gentle soundscapes. And it's sort of a normal slow pace, gentle voice. And as the episode goes on, she speaks more and more slowly. And so it just kind of takes you on this cadence of lulling you into sleep. And it's the closest thing to ASMR that I personally find useful for myself. So that's Boring Books for Bedtime. And I wanted to give one more bonus shout out. So even though I do not love the whispery ASMR style, there is a podcast that my content has been featured on that is that. It's called Sleep Whispers. And way back, I think in 2017 and 2018, Harris reached out to me because I was teaching meditation at that time. I was podcasting, but I was also teaching meditation. And somehow we found each other through the internets or networking. I don't even really know. And he was looking for content that he could read in a whisper on his ASMR style podcast. And so I sent him a few meditations that I had scripted that I used with folks who were attending my yoga classes or my meditation workshops. And you can find the landing page for those specific episodes from 2017 and 2018 if you go to bit.ly/PEP ASMR, bit.ly/PEP ASMR. You will find that link in the show notes, or you can also find all of the links at podcastenvy.com. Let's see, what did I do? In September 2017, I sent Thoughts Like Water. In January 2018, he published a body scan. And in June of 2018, he published The Sound in the Forest. So those are some meditations that I scripted and then he whispered onto the podcast. Kind of a fun thing to check out. So that wraps up my playlist of my nighttime sleepy podcasts. I would love to know what you like to fall asleep to. I mean, probably all I really care about are podcasts that you fall asleep to. I probably don't care about any other stuff, but please reach out. You can email me, Andrea at thecreativeimposter.com, or you can DM me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you're a listener of Podcast Envy because I only accept connection requests from people who I actually have a connection to. Once again, don't forget to check out SleepPhones. Use my link if you do order some so that I can get a little thank you back from them. If you're tuning in live or you aren't tuning in live yet, but you would like to, I'm scheduling these live stream recordings on my LinkedIn profile, which is just Andrea Clunder, and also on my YouTube, which I think is The Creative Imposter. I don't know. I'm not great at YouTube yet. And I'm just kind of scheduling them whenever I feel like it, whenever it feels like a good time, and when it might actually be quiet. And the next one is coming up Thursday, March 16 at noon Central Time with the one and only Jessica Kupferman from She Podcasts and She Podcasts Live, and now the Sonic Bloom Awards. So we're going to be talking about conferences, community, how to keep going when podcasting gets hard or confusing or boring or frustrating, and why on earth would you start an awards show for podcasters? What is going on behind that? So again, that's Thursday, March 16 at noon Central with Jessica Kupferman from She Podcasts. And that's all I have for you. I would like to wish you a very lovely evening. Thank you. Good night.
Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Clunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz. And hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Imposter Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.